Welcome to the webinar today. It's about Ask Me Anything from two data privacy experts. I'll introduce myself. I am Ife Davis. I am the Security Compliance Manager here at BetterCloud, and I have my privacy partner in crime. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, glad to be here. I'm Jodi Daniels. I am a privacy consultant and founder and CEO at Red Clover Advisors, which is a boutique data privacy consultancy. So excited to be here today.
Yeah, excited to be with you too, Jodi. So we're going to establish a few things as we go along. I wouldn't be a security person or a privacy person with me if I didn't tell you that today's episode is going to be recorded. So please know that, okay? So I wouldn't do myself a due diligence without saying that. We're gonna manage the time and give you the agenda. The format is 30 minutes of us kind of having some discussion. You have the ability to do a Q&A, so submit some questions. Feel free to do that in that Q&A section. We do have some interactivity, so we're gonna do some polls along as we go along. So share in those polls and I'll remind you of when those polls come up. And like I said, at the end, when we finish our discussion, we have 15 minutes of live Q&A. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the agenda. So what we're going to talk about today is a lot of things around security and privacy. And the three main prevalent things we wanted to talk about today was this whole remote work, right? Everybody understands that now. And then we'll talk about CCPA and CCPA 2.0. If you didn't know, there was a 2.0 coming. So, and then we'll end on vendor management. What does it mean to have vendor management during these times? Again, we'll have the polls and then a live Q&A. So I see the numbers going up. Let's go ahead and jump right in and get started. What we talk about and wanted to share with you was remote work kind of brings a lot of new dynamics. Right? So as you can tell, me and Jodi are remotely doing this, right? And so remote work for companies means what, right? Just a huge thrust into a digital transformation, right? So 61% of companies being attacked in the past year. A lot of this data that you see kind of shows you the impact that it has had on security and privacy. Which is going to take us to a poll. Our first polling question. I'm going to launch that poll for everyone. And the question in the poll, do you feel your security posture has gotten better or worse since we're moving to remote work? I see people are answering now. If you are multitasking while you're doing this, if you would take a moment to answer the poll, we'd like to get that percentage as high as we can, just to kind of get a real good gauge. You feel like your security posture has gotten better or worse moving to remote work? We'll take a few minutes, okay? 68%, thank you for that. That number continues to grow. Are you surprised by anything here, Jodi?
I might not want as much of the worst to be here. That's a little higher than I think I'd want. Same would be good. But actually, I guess really not surprising. So given the risks.
Yeah. All right, this number is growing to 81%, 36 of the 47 people. I understand, again, people are multitasking. So again, try to get as many getting close. And it's really interesting to see. All right, so I'm going to end this poll and we look at this results, right? Pretty even, right? Because to your point, Jodi, I wouldn't want it to see the worst be as high as it is. And that could be a frightening thing. So, but interesting, the better and the same are the same.
Yeah, that is interesting.
That is an interesting dynamic there. So I'm going to stop sharing that poll results and get back to some conversations. So when you think about remote work, I'll keep the poll there, but when you think about remote work, some of the challenging things that we have faced is a little bit of what around email security, right? So here's a little joke that we have, right? What remote work looks like. I can't remember, do I work at home or do I live at work? That's pretty much what people feel like these days. Same to you, Jodi? You feel the same way?
Oh yeah, just all day long. It's like the same thing all all intertwined together. And for some, we could also add some kids that might be working around that desk.
Right, right.
Am I working at home
animals.
or am I just working at school?
Right, exactly. That's a great point, right? So what we notice now is the sensitivity of data on your employees' laptops, right? So you give them a laptop and they go home, right? And so now they're storing some personal data on that laptop, which increases the chances of risk. And we've seen some top breaches this year, not necessarily around remote work, but just a lot of increase in those top breaches. One of those top security risks, email security, right? So not knowing what the employees are sending out, phishing, we know that really well, right, Jodi? Social engineering and phishing emails, I mean, have quadrupled when it comes to, oh my God, get your pandemic test, click on this button. And how do you help employees with that? Any suggestions from you, Jodi, before I just dive right in?
Yeah, so there's a few. Quite honestly, earlier this morning, I was working with a company and we were evaluating training and making sure that we have the latest and greatest training. And we had an entire phishing campaign as a part of it. So being able to not only educate, here's what a phishing email is, here's some great tips to remind you, and also let's conduct some phishing campaigns. Let's see who's going to fall for the bait. I cannot overemphasize the amount of communication and training that people need. I mean, I think the statistic is you need to hear it 7 times before it even registers. So if you just did training once a year, you have 6 more times before it's going to even click and register of what it is I need to do. And I think the stat for phishing is like 350% since the beginning of the year of the amount of phishing emails that are out there. So I'm going to go with training as my number one requirement here.
Number one. And because I'm in charge of security awareness at BetterCloud, I will definitely say it's number one. And there's a great opportunity, right? When the pandemic starts and everyone goes home, we had a session, a Q&A session for our employees about how to think about security. But Cybersecurity Awareness Month is in October, right?
Say that.
So hit the education button and go ahead and educate and engage, right? It elevates your employees' thinking, but also make it personal, right? So tell them, like you said in this picture, it's not just about work and how do you protect. It's about, all the camera being on, the kids being online. So you really want employees to understand that security is the responsibility of the company, but a lot of it is still falling in their hands, right? So educate around the phishing emails, really boost up your Cybersecurity Awareness Month, kind of make it personal so that they can, to understand it a little more. It engages them. But also, hey, we already know, malware detections, endpoint security, making sure your VPN and all of that is taken care of. So any other comments around remote work from you or Jodi?
So, I would emphasize, since you have people at home who might not be familiar with Wi-Fi security and router security, and they have no idea what they're doing. And for some of our audience, they might not have actually gone home with a laptop. They might need, not everyone who's working remotely actually had and received a work laptop. They might be using a personal laptop to be able to log in, or maybe the work laptop's being annoying and I'm just going to go log in over here on my personal one. So really making sure we have strong passwords, we're using multi-factor authentication. We've changed and updated our router Wi-Fi, and that is locked down. And for some, they have no idea. It's like talking Greek. You have zero clue what that is.
That's right.
So being able to help with a session, a walkthrough session, a visual session, a picture session, a Zoom session, any type of session, to be able to help make sure that everyone understands what to be doing to protect them at home and their personal machines that also might need to be used for work.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to making it personal, right? So it helps the employee know that you care about them, but now they have other things to do at home. Because patching, right? We all know making sure your systems are patched, and how do you make sure those systems get patched even remotely? So really great points, really great points. So remote work was one of the big topics we had today, and we wanted to share it, especially as we do this remote. Let's go on to the next topic. Let's go back. And there's another, we had to add another joke here, right? What's your biggest cybersecurity risk that people are seeing? What do you think, Jodi?
Oh, phishing is, we did just talk about phishing, but phishing is probably honestly the biggest issue right now.
Yeah.
I mean, just last night, my husband showed me, granted we're a little privacy and security savvy in our house, but he's like, this is a phishing email from Apple, and this is a phishing email. Who was the other one? Maybe it was Verizon. And we could totally tell that it was phishing. I mean, I've even gotten some from Zoom before, and you have to really put on your magnifying glass and look and try and figure that out. I think that's going to be it. And our kind of looking at the password, I think, is another one.
Yeah.
And kind of connected to patching. My laptop is out of the office where you just mentioned. Right. I'm not getting all of the patches. I might not be updating and hitting the update button like I was forced to do inside the office.
That's right.
And so to me, those are going to be the biggest risks that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And for us, we kind of force it on them now because, like you said, some people don't even want to hit the update button because it's going to slow them down, right? So we kind of give a clock that says countdown, and then because we know everybody's busy. So that was really great points. All right, let's go on to the next. Another favorite topic, right? So CCPA, for those who don't know, is the California Consumer Privacy Act, right? So this is near and dear to Jodi's heart. So I'll hand it to you, privacy partner.
Yes, so CCPA, for anyone who forgot what that stands for, is the California Consumer Privacy Act. It became effective January 1st, and it became enforceable July 1st. Yep, cocktail hour for the explanation on why that is. But like the very first one you have here, we have 2.0. And you had mentioned earlier, right? There's something else maybe coming. So in November, Californians are not only voting for president, they are also voting for the potential of a new privacy law. It's called CPRA, because we all need some more acronyms. It's the Consumer Privacy Rights Act. And it's also kind of nicknamed CCPA 2.0. And if you almost had a chart where CCPA is sort of the bottom left corner, GDPR would be the top right corner, this moves us up a couple notches on that trajectory towards GDPR. It has a number of different requirements underneath it with sensitive data, more obligations for protecting data. It brings into play email and password as a potential for data breach. So there's a lot underneath that law. We're not going to go into all of it, but the idea behind the protection is really an important one because it does bring into scope that sensitive data and the potential for more data to be classified as data under a data breach. And you have here, there's already class action lawsuits that are here. So as a brief reminder, one of the individual rights or the items underneath CCPA is this idea of a private right of action. If there's a data breach, and essentially kind of met a couple of criteria, like you didn't have any reasonable security controls at your company. So you knew about patching, but you didn't do it for a couple months. Who wants to do that? Or you had no security program in place, or that role's been vacant for a really long time, or you haven't patched, or you haven't encrypted. There are a long list of things. There's the potential for a private right of action. In our very litigious society, there are attorneys just pouncing and waiting to see the list and announcements of a data breach, and then they're going to file suit. Whether it's even plausible or not, they're going to file. And so now you're in the position of, defense here. And so we already see a number of them, big names that you can go after this call to go Google and find the various names. We don't want to share this here. We're going to be very privacy focused here.
Privacy focused. All right. So let me make sure I got it right. I got CCPA, CPRA, and then GDPR. Is that right?
There you go. That's
all right. It's in the middle. So we're going up a notch. Let's see what people think about this, right? So am I prepared for GDPR? If I'm prepared for GDPR, am I covered for CCPA?
Well, you have an awesome starting ground. You are not 100% covered. And the reason for that is a fewfold. First, a lot of companies did actually only review the data in scope for GDPR. So a lot of companies only looked at the EU focused data and didn't address anything in the United States. So that would be one of the reasons. If you were a company that didn't do it that way, you covered everything in the United States, CCPA does look at things a little bit differently. One of them is the definition of who's covered for personal information, and that can be households and devices underneath CCPA, which wasn't really the case for GDPR. Another topical item for CCPA is the sale of data. It's this very interesting, unique definition around, and almost everyone I'm sure on this call is going to say, we don't sell data. We don't sell data. And you really might not actually sell data for $1. However, if you share data with a third party, what that third party does with it could be construed as a sale of data, and what obligations you or contractual provisions you told them they had to follow. So there's a variety of situations where the data might be sold. And so what does that mean for you? Well, if you sold the data, you have disclosure requirements, but I can come to you and say, I don't want you to sell my data, which means you have to know where my data is and what systems it's in to be able to unwind that sale of data. So there's a significant undertaking that has to happen, and you kind of have to also document, it is a sale, it's not a sale. You have contractual and vendor obligations, and we're going to talk about vendor management. This is really where it ties in, of understanding what data I have, who does it go to, who are these people, and what did I tell them they can and can't do with it. And then if it qualifies, your disclosure requirements, and you have to be able to allow me to opt out of the sale of that data. And there's a lot of technical nuances to that.
Yeah, that was some very good points, because we're going to really roll to that vendor management and tag team on that one too. Let's see if we can do a poll question. I got another one. I heard rumblings about CCPA 2.0. You talked about it, right? And you talked about what are some of the differences, right?
Yes.
I want to say this
cartoon,
right? We're going to run to the poll. All right, let me launch this next poll to see how people are doing when it comes to CCPA. All right. If CCPA passes in November, I'm going to launch this to see, right? If CCPA 2.0 launches in November, how will it affect you?
I'm loving the responses so far.
I'm telling you, we're totally ready. We are totally ready. Yeah.
I wouldn't expect too many totally readies, I'll be honest.
I know, right? I'm just saying, I'm seeing there's 0 that are totally ready, right? So I get it. So if you're listening to my voice, but you're not necessarily engaged in the conversation, we just launched our second poll. So if you take a moment, come back to us and go ahead and answer the poll question. If CCPA 2.0 passes in November, how will it affect you? We'll take a few minutes. I got 50% in. We kind of did like 81% when we first started. Let's see if we can get that number up again. Oh, we do have some totally ready.
Wow.
At least one, all right? Kudos.
I want to hear from you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. 55%. Let's see if there's any more coming. I kind of think we kind of know where this one is going with that. So I'm going to end the poll now. I kind of see the trajectory here. Let me share the poll results as we were watching them come in, right? So if CCPA 2.0 passes in November, 70% of people are still recovering from 1.0, right? A lot of changes in the privacy landscape as we're talking today. And let's kind of roll right in. I'll stop sharing that result. Let's start rolling right into what you already mentioned with vendor management, right? So let's go into this vendor management conversation. You mentioned that, let me go back one. Vendor management and the compliance, more important than ever. Jodi mentioned it. The privacy landscape is changing. Data is the currency, right? It's the new currency, and how you handle the data and map that data is changing. And so as you look at these times, your reliability on your vendors is huge. And if that is the case, and for many of us it is, what are you doing now to kind of work with your vendors to make sure you're doing a security assessment, right? You know what the risk posture is. Are they going to be viable? Can they make it through? These are some of the things you want to look at. But as Jodi mentioned, knowing where your data is and who it is with, right? So business continuity plans and et cetera, can they handle going through the pandemic, right? So you want to take a look at surveying your vendors. Most of the time, from a compliance standpoint, we do that annually. Since the pandemic, you really want to take some due diligence around those data conversations and really digging into, especially your sub-processors. I'll let Jodi answer. What's a sub-processor, Jodi?
A sub-processor is a company doing something else for you? So maybe I am, we'll just use like an ad agency. So maybe I'm an ad agency, but then the agency itself goes and hires a number of other vendors who are going to actually do the work for me. So that's going to be a sub-processor. Or I built my platform on AWS, and then I have AWS has a number of others. So there might, to make its platform work. So that could be another sub-processor. So kind of imagine a stream, you start at the top, it goes to the next level, and then all the way down. Every block down is considered a sub-processor or a subcontractor.
Yeah. And great explanation. I really like that description. And sub-processors, to your point, could be selling your data. So then I'm going to use a term that you know really well and that people may be hearing, but I want you to explain it. Those SCC clauses. What is SCC?
Yes, I had someone yesterday reach out and say, I have this 12-page contract. What on earth is all this? And I said, I bet you a lot of it are standard contractual clauses. They went back and they said, oh yeah, those are the standard contractual clauses. What are those things?
Yes.
And can I change them? And I said, no, they're literally standard contractual clauses.
They standard.
They're in 28 different languages. Pick which one you'd like. So essentially what the standard contractual clauses are and allow is for data to move from the EU to another country, not only the US, but to any other country that does not have privacy regulations that are equal and considered adequate to the EU. So the GDPR in the EU says, if your data is going to leave my country, that's okay, but you have to have it to my standards. So one of the ways in the United States we used to do that, you might have heard of Privacy Shield. Many of you might be Privacy Shield certified. But in mid-July, that was basically invalidated. So the next option, and some companies already did this, were these standard contractual clauses. Literally, they contract their way to being able to move that data, which means the inbound receiver of the data, which could be many of you here, if you're a processor for companies, then you're obligated to say, I'm only going to use the data for whatever reason you're supposed to deliver that service. You're going to protect the data and have the right security measures in place. You're going to train people. You're not going to share it with anybody else. And that's kind of the basics of what those clauses say in about like 12 pages.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, Jodi. So we have another question here. How do you ensure your vendors are remaining compliant and viable during the pandemic? Right. So me and Jodi just talked about some of those examples, right? So those SCCs, I keep saying that because I want you to know those standard contractual clauses. Also, creating another survey for yourself where you reach out to the vendor and say, hey, during this time, I want to do a sense check. Vendors are people too, so they are also going through. So checking in with them to make sure that they are keeping up with their assurance reports. They're SOC 2, they're still moving forward. Just kind of seeing where they stand. And again, don't forget your annual risk assessments of the vendors, especially your sub-processors and your critical ones. You want to stay focused on those. All right, let's go on to another poll. This is our final poll question. This is going to be around vendor management. So I'm going to launch this poll question for everyone. Let's go back because the poll is launched. All right, so in answering this question, how well do you know your vendors? Giving this a few minutes. Again, if you're not really engaged as we get to the 1:30 time frame and you're paying attention to your next meeting, please answer the poll. Just take a few minutes to say, how well do you know your vendors? Got a 46% coming in, 51. Thank you for answering the questions. Interesting numbers, right? It's kind of even across the board. Any surprises for you, Jodi?
No.
Yeah.
No, this is pretty consistent with what I'd expect.
Pretty consistent. All right. All right. So at 68%, I'm going to go ahead and stop the polling and then we can share the results. All right. So sharing the polling results show pretty even across the board. 41% says they've done full assessments. Kudos to you for doing those full assessments. Who you know, but you haven't assessed the risk, 28%. I hope they're not your sub-processors. And then I'm not sure who all of our vendors are. Get to work, right? Because this could be a dangerous
data
thing.
inventory, it's going to be
Data
critical.
and data mapping, right? Knowing where that data is going to be really critical. All right, so I'm watching the time, and we did promise a live Q&A. So we're going to do a lightning round with questions. So let's go ahead and get started. What's the one tactical thing that everyone can do to protect their personal data right now? What do you say, Jodi?
I'm going to go with passwords. Passwords for 500. I think you should make sure that you've changed your passwords. If you didn't have a password policy now, force everyone to do so and make it be a complex password.
Yeah,
It'd be better if you add MFA with it, password plus.
Yes, please, MFA, right? And I'm going to say patching for 1,000, right? Microsoft Tuesdays is very important. Patch yourself up, even if you don't have a password, at least that system, because these companies know what systems problems are. So patching, that was a good one. I like that. Let's get to the next one. Do you know which state is coming with next privacy laws? Like kind of click 2 because 2 and 1. What's the next state coming with 1? And will there be a federal privacy law?
So Washington State is back for the 3rd time. They are a determined state to get this passed. And it makes sense. They have so many technology companies that are really pro-privacy laws and pro-privacy overall. So just September 9th is Washington State back for the 3rd time. We will have to watch and see what happens with that state, but they are serious for it. And there are other states watching in the foreground and kind of in the background. So they might not all come out and say, here's ours, but there are many states kind of privately looking at it. And then will there be a federal privacy law? So it feels like every week there's a privacy law introduced at federal government for at least the last 10 years that I've been paying attention. Most recently, there was actually a brand new federal privacy law called the SAFE Act that combines kind of 3 existing federal privacy laws that had all been introduced. And so it will also be a bit of a wait and see of what will happen with everything happening with COVID right now and health data and the significant transformation digitally. There is now more pressure. We're in a little bit of a pressure cooker for a federal privacy law. The big issue is which is going to be preempt. Is the federal law going to overtake the states, or will the states still be able to keep their state law the way it is? And that is a bit of a toss-up to see which direction it will go and when it will be passed.
Yeah, a nail biter is what we like to say, right?
There's that way too, absolutely.
There you go. All right, and then the last question of the lightning round is how often should you do your vendor assessment, and has the frequency changed? I mentioned from a compliance standpoint in the audit world, you need to do it at least annually. Frequency should have changed. You maybe want to check in now, as we thought the pandemic may not last as long as it's done. So I would do a check-in. If it's not due right now, maybe check in for your 4th quarter for many people to check in and see how they're doing from a viability standpoint. So that was a great question. Made it, Jodi. Made it to the live Q&A. So privacy partner, I got a question for you as we launch the live Q&A. Someone wants to know, can you talk about more of the difference between CCPA service providers and third parties? And is there a difference in obligations between each?
Yeah, so there is a difference. It's a very interesting nuance of a service provider versus a third party, because I think most people just kind of refer to, I sent it to another company, and that is a vendor, a third party, or a service provider. That's how most people use common language. But in the law, a service provider is that. It is another company who is providing a service for you. And the only ability for them to use the data or process the data is to deliver that service. So the contract would generally specify, you're my service provider, you can only use the data for this purpose. A third party can be any other company, and they might not have the same provisions. I might share it with this third party, and they can use it for their own purposes. So there is a nuance, and vendor isn't really used quite as much. So pick which bucket you'd like to put the word vendor in.
Right, exactly. Vendor, third party, that's kind of interchangeable. So I agree there. Yeah. All right, another CCPA, and really great point from a viewer. I need to put an option, or we need to put an option that says, do you even know what CCPA is? So great point there, because you're right? These acronyms going around all day. Next question, does your company need to be in California based, or does it impact you if you have employees working remotely there?
So the law, I'm going to have a technical answer and then kind of a reality answer. So the technical answer to CCPA is it needs to be a California resident. The resident tends to tie itself to the tax code. So if I just decided to kind of pick up and live in California for 6 months and I'm renting like from an Airbnb, or I'm just going to stay in a, I don't know, hotel or my best friend's house, I might not be a California resident. However, at the same time, depending on the type of information that you have, you might not actually know if they're from California, or they might use a temporary California address to have that information sent to them. So then you kind of have to go with, well, what is it that I need to be worrying about from a compliance standpoint? So if Jodi's in California and you ship me something, and so now you have all my information because that's my temporary address, and I say, you know what, I would like to know what data you have on me, even if I'm not an official California resident, if you just tell me, I'm sorry, I don't know if you're a California resident, like, what's my answer going to be? I'm probably not going to love you as so much. And I'm going to kind of question, well, hold on, aren't I the customer? And I thought the customer's right. So the technical answer is it goes to the residency of the person, but depending on the scenario, you kind of have to keep in mind either the employee or the customer in that scenario. So there might be a bit of gray in how you handle that.
No gray in law, right?
Of course not. No, it's totally black and white.
There's no gray there.
It's kind of like the screen where you have some, cool checks and then it's phased out over here and all solid. It's very similar.
It's very similar, but I mean, really great questions, because privacy is the big conversation. So CCPA and stuff, and those questions are great. I didn't see any more questions, so feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A chat room. That way we can see them and then we can answer them accordingly. And as we wait for more questions to come in, because I think I've answered all of the ones that were there so far. So that's
I see some.
You see some?
Okay. Wi-Fi, I see some, but I see some, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead. If you see some, go.
So someone had mentioned starting to apply for jobs and starting to get spam emails. Is there any trick we could do to detect these and block them automatically? Maybe you want to take that one first?
Yeah, so for us, when it comes to personal emails, that's a really tough one. Depending on your email provider, you can move it to spam and they can kind of check for it, like unsubscribe or block. Sometimes people don't realize that when they're out and they subscribe to different things, those emails come. Or even sometimes when you're job searching, you're on particular websites just to get the jobs. That third party that you're using is selling your information to get you spam. So I would say continue to use your spam button depending on your email provider, and it will automatically roll and start reducing. But this is, as me and Jodi mentioned, it's the time. They're gonna keep fishing. So as long as you try to recognize the signs and don't click the link, move it to spam.
Yeah, I actually have a kind of interesting related story. Yesterday, I got an email that wasn't phishing, and it was a real email, and I was, okay, I want to unsubscribe from this. So I clicked unsubscribe. Fascinating. It was someone else's name.
Ooh.
In the first name and last name in my old email address from a long time ago. So yes, the privacy person grabbed a snapshot, and I'll figure out what to do with that. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. Do you see another one? Because I see one came in again.
Yeah, I see. Well, go ahead. I see a couple others, but you can grab one.
All right. No, I'm going to hand it to you. So can you speak more about businesses' obligations to have SCCs or DPAs in place with vendors and sub-processors? What's the reality of any consequences for not having a DPA or SCC in place?
Did you say BPA or DPA?
DPA. SCCs and DPAs.
Got it. So the risk that you have is also a little bit depending on the type of business that you are, B2B or B2C in my view. So for anyone, first, I would say as all good business stewards, we want to adhere to the laws and we want to make sure that we're protecting our data. And so that contract is what we have to go and make sure that the other side is doing what we want them to do. We want them to be doing the right thing with our data. And if that company used it in any manner that we didn't want them to, if they had a breach and they didn't communicate properly or they didn't protect our data properly, we don't have any recourse. That is our agreement to be able to have any recourse with them. And it's the way that they've promised us they're going to use the data the way we told them that they can, and again, to protect that data. The reason I mentioned the B2B versus B2C is in a B2B environment, that is also often what will make or break a sale. And so the companies that have, especially a technology company that has that DPA already on its website, it's put forth, I care about privacy and security. I understand it. Here you go. Here's our standard one. Now, that doesn't mean if you're a company and you don't have that on the website, you just often might negotiate that individually, which is perfectly fine. If you have that ready and able to sign, then it also shows, oh, you are a company that is serious to do business with. And again, you're going to have a step ahead of potentially your competitor who isn't prepared to be able to sign that. So if you are the company who's kind of requesting it, know that it is your protection of your data that's happening. And if you are the company being the service provider, it's your competitive edge and advantage to making sure that you have your privacy and security ducks all in a row.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. Do you have another question?
I do. So someone asked about Privacy Shield. So kind of related to this, if a company is about to start GDPR preparation, is there any value in still doing Privacy Shield, or is it totally done with? I would say right now for companies who are already certified under Privacy Shield, they actually have to keep renewing, because any data they collected up until the point it was invalidated mid-July is still in scope for Privacy Shield. But they're really, I don't even know if you can apply to be a new company under Privacy Shield, because it doesn't exist. It's not accepted now. There is conversation between the EU and the US. So it actually used to be called Safe Harbor. Then that was invalidated. Then they came up with Privacy Shield. There could potentially be a version 3. I don't know what or when that will be here. So my suggestion is to really not move forward with Privacy Shield right now, and to move forward with your standard contractual clauses that are generally a subset of the data protection addendum, that DPA that we just talked about.
Yeah. And also too, a suggestion is the Cloud Security Alliance has the code of conduct for GDPR compliance. That may be something to look at as well. So, but it is one of those nail biters. We're all waiting. We were all shocked and what to do next. So that's a great point. Do you have one more question, Jodi?
I do. There's actually a lot of different ones here.
Oh, okay. All right.
So let's see. Oh goodness, so there's lots of them. How about, we'll pick this one because I think this is so relevant right now, which is, unfortunately, school and home have merged as well. What best practices can I share with my employees and my family to make sure kids are safe on camera?
Great question. Great question.
Yeah, I know you had some strong thoughts on this, so why don't you take this one first?
Yeah, so when it comes to kids being online, that is very much a passion. It's about you have to educate them, even as you would employees. You have to educate them. You have to say, if you see that green light, it's on. But then also camera covers as well. So having that camera covered, because sometimes they don't even know the camera is on, but when they're out of it, making sure that, you know, they can be safe online. So when it comes to kids online, there's a company there's a nonprofit that does Safe Kids Online. I really recommend anybody who has kids at home that are online, check out that website and really engage your kids so that they understand.
Yeah, and I'll add to it. Another one is also Savvy Cyber Kids. It's
That's
one
right.
I'm personally involved with. And then also making sure that you're educating people, just like, you know, Zoom bombing and adults were educated, making sure kids are too, and questioning, well, hold on, who is that number and who is that name? And well, why are they saying those types of things? And so that they feel empowered to be able to bring that up to a teacher or to their friends, or to turn their camera off or to hang up.
Yeah, it's very important. I 100% agree with you. Very important. Can we take one more?
Yes. So let's see. We have, well, here's one. Experience or thoughts on ISO 27701 for privacy. So that's a really great question.
It's a really great question.
Yep. For starters, you have to be ISO 27001 certified, and then you can move on to the privacy. So for anyone who's wondering, more acronyms, seriously. So ISO 27001 is often a security certification that companies go through. And now they've kind of introduced a privacy focused one. There's very few companies around the world today who have that. It will be a growing piece in time. And it does align pretty significantly to GDPR's requirements. It's not exactly a one-for-one, but fairly close. And so if that is important to you, depending on the type of data that you have, and again, you're already ISO 27001 certified, then that could be a next logical step. you would certainly be ahead of the curve and joining one of the few elite companies in that category today.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. I know you probably have a ton of other questions, so we'll keep those in our queue so we can follow back up with people regarding those questions. But we want to be mindful of the time. Jodi, you want to take it away for what you have here, this quiz?
Sure. So I have a fun quiz. It's kind of the what's the number one privacy mistake that will get you sued? So it's a short quiz, and you are invited to take it. And on the same page is some other information that you might find relevant to remote working. So I invite you to go and check that out.
Okay. And for BetterCloud, we do a live demo every Wednesday to kind of learn about our products, the ins and outs. We have some experts that come and give some tips and tricks on security and IT. So our weekly demo, you can use this link to sign up. It is every Wednesday, so please join us. And then, hey, for BetterCloud, we have an Altitude conference that is coming up in October. October 19th through the 23rd is an Altitude conference. And this is the first year, like many others, we are doing it remotely. And the great thing about this is you'll get the roadmap for where the product is going, et cetera. And then you get to choose your schedule. So we'll have a list of speaking engagements and people who will be hosting different topics around IT subjects for IT folks, for security folks. So if you click that link and sign up, then you get to choose what you attend to. So you get to kind of have a flexible schedule and come join us for that. We want to both thank you for joining us today. Here's Jodi's email address as well as my email. If you in the future have more questions or want to reach out to us, that's Jodi over at Red Clover. Just reach out via this email address. Again, this has been a recorded session, so you will get the recording. The recording will be up. And with that, I want to say thank you to everyone who has joined us today. I'm very mindful of time, so I wanted to say thank you for everyone who's joined us. And I'll let everyone go for today. Thank you guys.
So much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. It's fun having you, Jodi. See you soon.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.